D, consideration action on approval of supplement to the agreement with HDR for phase 2 of construction for Briscoe Park. For Kathy or
Ms. Deal was going to speak to that. That's what Lisa said.
This is to provide construction services into the contract. The original contract we had with the engineer record was not a full service contract. And in order to utilize him for inspections, submittal reviews, pay application reviews, things like that, is to provide this.
do we know how much it's going to change the contract?
It's
no more than 24,500.
no more
So
than
does that need to be in
24,500.
part of the motion?
It's a not to exceed number, so I don't think so.
Why now? I mean, why did it surface now and not in the original contract?
At this point, it's just strictly convenience. But why it was not in the original contract, I didn't know. That original contract was done through Mr. Treadway, Lisa. I was not even part of the party.
Okay. And again, I'm just
Typically
trying,
it is.
just trying
I
to
agree.
figure. I mean, okay, there's where I was going with it. I think typically it is.
Any other questions about the contract for Briscoe Park?
Could we get a little bit more understanding of why it's added now and not in the original contract? I mean, is there something that needs to be signed tonight, or we lose it, or anything like that? I mean, I'd like to know why.
Well,
It's kind of like bait and switch to me, you know, like you sell them out, you know? Come on in, then let's, okay, if it does include the AM/FM radio or something. I mean, we signed the contract, now they're coming up with, and as you say, it's usually included, and now, 11th hour, we're being told, no, you need to pay another $24,500. I'd just like to explain why it wasn't considered.
I mean, it raises a significant question for me.
Well, I have no question. If need be, I can get HDR here and they could explain it.
Could we do that for our next
My only
meeting?
guess is they were probably not asked to provide that at the time. I was not, like I said, I was not part of that.
Well,
And Lisa's not here.
I mean,
Can we postpone this to our next meeting then, so we can get better answers on it?
We can postpone. I know the tractors are out there, they're waiting to do work, so it just means that they will sit there until we execute.
That makes it a little bit more suspect to me to get the tractors out there. Sorry, I mean, construction, all guys do that.
Mr. Wilkes, could I ask you, what are your specific concerns? I'd be happy.
That's an additional $24,500 over above the contract we approved.
Well, the contract we approved was for design only. That was the way it was written. So we've never addressed the construction issues at all.
Okay. Then maybe I misheard you. I was understanding you were saying that the $24,500 would usually be included in that contract. You know,
It's a typical engineering or architectural contract is broken down into various phases. You've got schematic, you've got design, you've got bid, you've got construction. And there's a percentage for each of those phases, typically. This phase was not included in the original contract. The only part of the original contract was design.
okay, so then this was an expected cost that you were expecting to incur.
At some point, yes. We just never had a,
does this stop work if we don't sign this tonight?
it will stop the architect's work, yes.
Okay, but as Mayor mentioned, tractors on the ground, does it stop what they are
The
already
architect
doing?
will not review any more submittals. So if they make some shop drawings, the piping, lighting, I know they do have the lighting reviews, they've already made a portion of that review already. But it will stop that because in the morning I have to notify
Well,
the
it's got my attention. It's just, all of a sudden it shows up and it, could be 24,000 or 240,000, it really wouldn't matter. It shows up.
Well, it's, I
We
understand
should
your concern.
have got it. So, I don't know that I'm comfortable signing it, so.
We'll have a discussion and I'll entertain a motion at the appropriate time in the meeting. That brings us to our work session agenda. Chief, you don't have any correspondence? correspondence to review?
No.
Mr. Powell, do we have the city attorney's report?
I only have executive session minutes.
A resolution for the Snellville Public Arts Commission. I think we've discussed that a few times, I don't know. This is the resolution as it stands. There were some changes we talked about in the last work session when this was on the last work session about making sure, that you put art in city facilities without permission of the council and a spending cap and things like that. Those have been incorporated, and I believe the language about the development has been taken out. So if council wants to review that, if you have any changes, if you'd let Tony know, that this is set to be on our next council agenda.
The only thing I think when we discussed this, we discussed that we're giving $10,000 to this, and that somewhere that anything that the purposes for those funds would be reviewed by council. And would that be part of this?
There was some language in there, anything over $2,000 that they spend, because we didn't want every single expenditure, if they're putting on a festival or something like that. Anything over $2,000 has to come in front of council, and then anything that is artwork, like if they were to buy something for city property, the park or something like that, it has to come in front of council for approval first. That language is in there. Any other questions tonight?
Back to that question, is it $2,000 for one invoice, is it?
It says aggregate amount to a vendor, $2,000 aggregate to any one vendor. Any other questions? The mobile use stage policy, I think we're still working on that, so we can put it back on another work session agenda. Strategic action agenda implementation team. I know Eric had a meeting last week, and I know Councilwoman Krause and Mayor Pro Tem Witt sent in their suggestions. I've looked at these. I think I've been clear with my concerns all along, in that I don't know if Snellville, and especially the citizens of Snellville, are represented in this committee. And so I will take these under advisement, and then under the charter, the mayor can appoint all committee members. So I've discussed this with Eric. I plan on making some changes to these, adding some people on, and then making the appointments when that decision is made. I think all of y'all should have received the list of potential people to serve. I would like to see some more, at least Snellville residents, on this list. I don't think that, there's only maybe 3 or 4 people that actually live in the city of Snellville on this list. I understand with the work session, and that they wanted input from business owners, but I think if we are talking about our own city, we need to get input from the people that live here, and that pay our taxes here. So I will let you know when I make those decisions. Any questions about that? And Eric, I believe the meeting is it tomorrow or Wednesday? Have you canceled that meeting?
The 19th is next Thursday.
19th, okay.
Just for clarification, the people that are on this are the same people around the implementation, around the strategic.
I'm not talking about those people, I'm talking about the additional names
Oh.
that were being provided. I think there's been some additional names suggested. I'm talking about those people. The Discovery Recovery Emergency Management Plan, Councilman Sabah.
While we were at Savannah for the GMA conference, Councilwoman Krause and I were having a hallway discussion about some of the findings that we found during the classes that we attended, in some of the hallway conversations with other cities, that it is becoming to be crucial to have a disaster recovery and a continuity operational. There's a difference between the two. To continue business is not the same as a disaster recovery. Huge difference. So I like to make sure that we happen to get something in motion that would set us into that, because the legalities behind this is extreme if we do not have a proper recovery if a disaster happens. I mean, one of the examples I said, everybody thinks of a disaster simply as the building collapsed because of an earthquake. Well, that's just only a minute thing. Fire, those are typical things. one of the things that Diane, Councilwoman Krause and I were talking about was, what if there was an anthrax spread inside the building? Biological type of situation like that. So we need to be able to have that in consideration. I think we don't have a proper disaster recovery that encompasses most of these items. Therefore, I'd like to make sure that we at least begin a process that looks into a disaster recovery situation that would get the building, the businesses, the citizens into an operation first and a recovery later. So I'd like to move forward with that with a more or less of a beginning finding stages initially. And I know we have some disaster recovery, with backup IT and all that, so maybe we're not in an embryonic setting just yet. We're probably beyond that a little bit. But I'd like to make sure that we happen to have a plan to draft a DRP and a continuity program.
Chief and Gay, I know we talked about this before, that there is an emergency management plan out there through, is it GMA?
Well, we actually fall under the county's emergency management plan. We follow they have responsibility for those things, but we do need probably to draft our own city policy relative to what we can do. And we're looking at, I know that Councilman Krause has talked to my officer who's assigned to that process. We're going to look at trying to obtain some other cities' policies to take a look at it, and then we'll report back at a later time once we have some information.
Could we, under the charter authority to form ad hoc committees, could we form a committee with Chief, if you want to put an officer on there, and Gabe, whether you or Craig or somebody from your staff, and then Councilman Krause and Councilman Sabah, if you two could serve on there. If you could maybe get a preliminary report back and then put it back on maybe an August agenda or something like that for y'all to report back to us. Is that agreeable to everybody?
The meeting that I had with Lieutenant McKinney was very knowledgeable for me, and we're not in as bad shape as I thought we were. However, it's the little things that count. Fire drill for City Hall. We have fire drill for City Hall. Do the staff know what to do? Is there somebody outside that knows who was in the building when we count heads and make sure everybody's accounted for? If there is, sometimes a disaster is only a disaster for the city. The county could care less, it's not big enough. GMA is not interested, and neither is FEMA. I want the city to be able to take care of what that disaster is. And so just a little bit of research that I've done on it, just coming up with a disaster plan, the minimum time is 18 months to come up with one. So it's not something that we can do overnight. We can look at another cities and do a cut and paste, put our name in it. I would rather have, like you said, a committee, an ad hoc, and really sit down and discuss it. Not only do we need it, but it's imperative that we have a relationship between the record services and the tree people and everybody in the community. We need to be able to protect the citizens, and that's why I'm on this council, is to protect these citizens of the city as well as that. And so we'll look at it, but it's not going to be something that's going to take a week.
And maybe in August, it may just be, this is what we have, and this is where we need to go from here. And maybe it's just more a meeting with the committee to get something together. Maybe it's something you need resources from council from. So if y'all could just give us a starting point report. I think you and I talked in the hall at the conference, your idea of a disaster, my idea of a disaster may be two different things. So maybe heads need to get together and see what we're exactly talking about as far as management. And if you need more time, but if you could just give us an update, maybe August or September. Okay. And if y'all could just arrange with yourselves to schedule those meeting dates. If you want to assign a staff person, I guess, to be the lead on that. Class action litigation, hotel motel tax. I should probably stop listening to these, but I got an email alert about this, and so I asked Mr. Powell, and is this something we can talk about now, or do we need to do an executive session?
You can do it either. We don't have to do executive session. I doubt that anybody's listening to this subject matter. There's a class action. Class action.
That's not what you want to hear.
Oh, no. Well, it's a good introduction to my recommendation.
That's not what you want to hear.
Yeah, it's a class action that was originated by a really good lawyer in Rome who does a lot of Georgia municipal work and on behalf of all the cities, and it deals with internet reservations and the tax on those reservations. It's a very limited focused issue, which in Atlanta, probably in Rome, probably makes a difference, but for here, it doesn't. And so the question is, do we separate ourselves from the class and initiate our own litigation, or do we accept into the class and let them do all the work for us and get what little bit that we would get? And my recommendation is to opt into the class. We have to collect a little information from our hotel folks, but it's very easy, and we'll get what little will come from that registers to our two hotels.
There's not a jump-in cost or anything?
No, no cost. It's all, the way class actions work, they contingency, the lawyers get paid.
At least now I know there's two good lawyers, and we have one.
Well, I appreciate that.
And if it's successful, we get 37 cents.
But I didn't calculate it, but my guess is that's pretty close. So, we don't want to ignore 37 cents.
Well, we have to put 44-cent stamp on the shares.
Responsibility.
You need this to have that.
I do have it. Yeah, I got it too. So, yeah, I'm preparing those documents.
Any other questions? All right, that brings us then to the LCI update.
All the tasks were completed and the submittals provided to GDOT per our agreed schedule to have the right-of-way certified and construction funds authorized by the end of June. So that's good news. I verbally confirmed this in conversation with ARC today. So we're in the wait-and-see mode for formal notification and execution of the GDOT construction phase contract before we can actually start the construction of the project. We'll stay on top of them and do what we can to get it.
Any questions for Billy?
To finish that update, what happens when the process we just entered into is the acquisition process goes from Tommy Terrell's office to our office. And so there are 4 remaining cases, and I do need to speak to you on one of those in executive session.
And so after the meeting, we'll go into executive session. We do have several items that we need to discuss in executive session tonight. With that, we are adjourned until 7:30.